I'm Jacob, I'm 34, and my family tried to destroy my life for revenge, only to end up destroying their own by breaking into a complete stranger's house. Before I tell you about the glorious, earth-shattering moment they realized their mistake from inside a police station, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Alright, let's get into it. The call came at 2 in the morning. You know that kind of call. The one that rips you from a dead sleep and your heart immediately tries to beat its way out of your chest before you even know who it is. The screen glowed with an unknown number. My first thought was Anya. She was a doctor. She worked crazy hours at the hospital. Maybe something happened on her shift. I swiped to answer, my voice thick with sleep. Hello. A man's voice, calm and official, cut through the silence. Is this Jacob Miller? Yes, I said, sitting up, my blood turning to ice. Who is this? This is Officer Ramirez with the Lakewood Police Department. I'm calling about your parents, Richard and Eleanor Miller, and your brother, Leo Miller. My breath caught in my throat. Lakewood. That was my old hometown, hundreds of miles away from where I was now. I hadn't spoken to any of them in 5 years. Not a single word. What could have possibly happened? Are they okay? I asked, the question tasting like rust in my mouth. It was a reflex, an old instinct I thought I'd killed off long ago. They're physically unharmed, sir, Officer Ramirez said, his tone unwavering. But they have been taken into custody. They were apprehended for breaking and entering and felony destruction of property. I squeezed the bridge of my nose, trying to process his words. Breaking and entering? My parents were in their 60s. My brother was a spoiled brat, not a criminal. I don't understand. Where? And then he said the words that sent a shiver down my entire spine. At 114 Willow Creek Drive. They insisted it was their son's house, but the current owner, a Mrs. Gable, says she's never seen them before in her life. She was the one who called 911. 114 Willow Creek Drive. My house. Or at least it was my house. A strange, cold feeling washed over me. It wasn't dread, and it wasn't fear. It was something else entirely. Something sharp and clear and devastatingly final. I stood up and walked to the window of my new apartment, looking out at the glittering lights of a city that was supposed to be my escape. Mr. Miller? Are you still there? The officer asked. I'm here, I said, my voice steady now, the sleep completely gone. I think you'd better tell me everything. He did. And as he spoke, the story of the last 5 years, a story of peace I had fought so hard for, came crashing down around me. But what my family didn't know was that when they tried to burn my world to the ground, they'd lit the match in the wrong house. And I wasn't the one who was about to get burned. To understand how my 60-year-old father ended up with a crowbar in his hand, you have to go back 5 years. I was 29, working as a junior software engineer. For 7 long years, ever since graduating college, I'd lived like a monk. I drove a 10-year-old Honda, I packed my lunch every single day, and my idea of a big night out was renting a movie instead of going to one. I did it all for one reason, a down payment on a house, and I'd finally done it, $120,000, sitting in my savings account. It was the proudest achievement of my life. That Saturday, I drove to my parents' house for our traditional family dinner, the checkbook for my savings account practically burning a hole in my pocket. I couldn't wait to see their faces when I told them. The house smelled like roast chicken the way it always did. My mom, Eleanor, hugged me at the door, her smile warm but her eyes already glancing past me, looking for the real star of the show. My dad, Richard, gave me a firm handshake and a pat on the back. Jacob, good to see you, son. And then there was Leo, my younger brother. He was standing in the living room with his wife, Qley, and he was practically vibrating with excitement. Leo was the golden child. He had the looks, the charm, and a graveyard of failed get-rich-quick schemes that my parents had happily funded. They'd burned through their small inheritance from my grandparents on his last 2 revolutionary startups. Big news, everyone. Big news. Leo announced before I could even take my coat off. Qley clung to his arm, beaming like he'd just cured cancer. We all sat down at the dinner table, and I decided to let Leo have his moment first. He unrolled a set of glossy brochures across the table. "Artisanal, cold-pressed organic cricket flour," he said, his eyes wild with passion. "It's the future of protein. Sustainable, eco-friendly, and we're getting in on the ground floor." I looked at the pictures of smiling, impossibly fit people holding bags of what looked like brownish dust. Here we go again. My parents, of course, were mesmerized. "Oh, Leo, that sounds wonderful," my mother gushed. "The profit margins are insane," he continued, pointing at a chart that made no sense. "We just need a little seed capital to secure the distribution rights. 120,000, to be exact." The number hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. My 120,000. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They all turned to look at me. It wasn't a question. It was an expectation. Qley put on her sweetest, most sincere voice. "Jacob, we all know how well you're doing. Your salary at that tech firm must be incredible. You're so good with money. Leo and we're the dreamers. You're the one who can make dreams a reality." I looked from Leo's manic grin to my mother's hopeful eyes, to my father's stern, expectant face. My own news, my own dream, felt like ash in my mouth. They hadn't even asked me how I was. "Leo," I began, choosing my words carefully. "Your last idea was selling luxury water for dogs. The one before that was an app for rating public restrooms. Both of them cost Mom and Dad nearly 50 grand. Leo's face fell. "This is different. This is a sure thing." "There's no such thing as a sure thing," I said, my voice firmer now. "And that's my house money. I've been saving for 7 years. My father cleared his throat, the sound like gravel grinding. "Son, a house is just bricks and mortar. Family is forever. Your brother needs this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at Leo, this man-child who had never worked a steady job in his life, and then I looked at the savings account statement I'd brought, now crumpled in my hand. "I can't," I said, my voice quiet but final. "I won't." The silence that followed my refusal was heavier than any argument. It was thick with disapproval and disbelief. Leo was the first to break it. His face crumpled, not in anger, but in a theatrical display of hurt. It was a performance I'd seen 100 times before, and it always worked. "I can't believe you, Jacob," he whispered, his voice trembling. "After everything this family has done for you. What have you done for me, Leo?" I shot back, the frustration I'd swallowed for years finally bubbling to the surface. "I paid my own way through college. I got my own job. I've never asked any of you for a dime. What I've done is watch you drain our parents' retirement fund on one bad idea after another." Qley let out a gasp and started crying, burying her face in Leo's shoulder. "How can you be so cruel?" she sobbed. That was the signal. My parents sprang into action, their roles perfectly rehearsed. My mother rushed to comfort Qley, shooting me a look of pure venom. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He was a big man, and he used his size to intimidate. "That's enough, Jacob," he boomed, his finger pointed at me. "You will not speak to your brother that way in my house." "I'm just speaking the truth," I said, standing up to meet his glare. "He's not a child anymore. He needs to take some responsibility. Get a real job. Stop treating you like his personal ATM." My mother turned on me, her eyes flashing. "Responsibility? You talk about responsibility? Your responsibility is to your family. Leo has a vision. He has ambition. Something you wouldn't understand. Sitting in your little cubicle all day, hoarding your money. Hoarding my money. The 7 years of skipped vacations, of driving a beater car, of saying no to friends so I could say yes to my future, they called it hoarding." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You're right," I said. "I don't understand. I don't understand how you can watch him fail over and over and keep throwing good money after bad. I don't understand why his dreams are more important than my reality. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. He took a step towards me. "I'll give you one last chance, Jacob. You are going to help your brother. You are going to give him that money. Or, so help me God, you are no longer a part of this family. We are done." The ultimatum hung in the air, sharp and ugly. This was it, the final test of loyalty. And the price of admission to this family was the complete and total sacrifice of myself. I looked around the room at their faces. Leo, hiding behind his wife's fake tears. Qley, peering at me with a flicker of triumph in her eyes. My mother, her arms crossed, her expression cold as stone. And my father, his jaw set, waiting for me to break, to fall in line like I always had. But something inside me had already broken. The part that craved their approval, the part that was terrified of being alone. It was gone. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "If that's the price, I can't afford it." I turned and walked to the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly behind me, the click of the latch sounding like the final word in a conversation that had been going on my entire life. As I walked to my car, I could hear my mother start to wail, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else's life. I got in my car, pulled out of the driveway, and didn't look back. The next day, I changed my phone number. The first few months were the hardest. The silence was deafening. Every holiday, every birthday, was a painful reminder of the family I no longer had. But with the pain came a strange and wonderful sense of freedom. My money was my own. My time was my own. My life was my own. 6 months after that dinner, I put the down payment on a small 2-bedroom house on Willow Creek Drive. It was modest, but it was mine. I spent every weekend painting the walls, planting a garden, and fixing the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink. Each swing of the hammer, each stroke of the paintbrush, felt like I was building not just a home, but a new life, one where my worth wasn't tied to how much I could give away. I poured myself into my work. Without the constant family drama draining my energy, I was focused and productive. I got a promotion, then another. My salary increased significantly. I started traveling for work, seeing parts of the country I'd only ever dreamed of. It was on one of those trips at a tech conference in Austin that I met Anya. She was a speaker at the event, a brilliant doctor specializing in medical technology. She was sharp, funny, and had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that night, and when I flew home, I knew I'd met someone special. We started a long-distance relationship. We talked on the phone every night and flew to see each other once a month. For the first time, I was in a relationship that was a partnership, not a rescue mission. She was independent, successful, and emotionally stable. One night, about a year into our relationship, we were having a video call. She was telling me about a difficult case at the hospital, and I was telling her about a frustrating bug in my latest project. "You know," she said, her expression thoughtful, "you talk a lot about your work and your house, but you never talk about your family." I tensed up. It was a subject I avoided with everyone. "It's complicated," I mumbled. Anya didn't push. She just waited. Her patience was one of the things I loved most about her. So I told her. I told her everything. About Leo, the golden child. About my parents' blind spot. About the cricket flower and the ultimatum. I expected her to be shocked, to maybe even think I was cold-hearted for walking away. Instead, she just nodded. "It sounds like you made an incredibly difficult, but necessary choice for your own well-being," she said simply. "Setting boundaries is hard, especially with family. I'm proud of you." Hearing those words, that simple validation, felt like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted off my shoulders. With Anya, I wasn't the family ATM or the responsible older brother. I was just Jacob, and that was enough. For 5 years, my life was peaceful. My house became my sanctuary. My career flourished. My relationship with Anya deepened into a profound love and respect. The ghost of my family faded into the background, a bad memory I rarely thought about. I was happy, truly deeply happy. And that, of course, was when they decided to come back. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. An email sitting in my junk folder from an address I didn't recognize. But the subject line made my blood run cold. Urgent, life or death. It was from my mother. My first instinct was to delete it, to send it into the digital abyss where it belonged, along with all the other ghosts of my past. But the words life or death gnawed at me. What if something had happened to my father? What if one of them was genuinely sick? Despite everything, a sliver of that old, ingrained sense of duty remained. I clicked it open. The email was short and frantic. Jacob, I know we haven't spoken. I know there are things that were said. But I am begging you. We need to see you. It's about Leo. It's a matter of life and death. Please, meet us at the old diner on Saturday. Just listen. That's all I ask. Mom. For 2 days I agonized over it. I showed the email to Anya. She read it, her brow furrowed. It sounds like a trap, Jake, she said, her voice gentle but firm. They know exactly which buttons to push. I know, I admitted. But what if it's not? What if Leo is really in some kind of trouble? And if he is, she countered. How has that ever not ended with them asking you for money? What's different this time? She was right. Nothing was different. But I had to know. I had to look them in the eyes and hear it for myself, if only to silence that tiny, nagging voice of guilt once and for all. I told myself I would just listen. No promises. No money. Just listen. I drove the 4 hours to my old hometown that Saturday, my stomach in knots. The diner was the same as I remembered, faded and smelling of stale coffee. They were already there, crammed into a booth in the back. My parents looked older, more tired than I remembered. Leo looked terrible. He was pale and jittery, his eyes darting around the room. Qley wasn't with him. The small talk was awkward and stilted. Then my mother reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Jacob, she began, her voice cracking. We wouldn't have called you if it wasn't the worst thing imaginable. And then the story came tumbling out. Leo, in his infinite wisdom, had started another new business, this time some kind of cryptocurrency venture. He hadn't just used his own money. He had borrowed. Heavily. From the wrong kind of people. How much? I asked, my voice flat. $150,000. My father mumbled, looking down at his hands. I felt a surge of dizzying, hysterical laughter bubble up inside me, but I choked it down. It was always more. The numbers just kept getting bigger. And they want it back now, Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. They're not messing around. They've been making threats. They know where I live. They know where Mom and Dad live. They mentioned you, Jacob. They know where you work. My mother started to cry. They said if he doesn't pay, they're going to hurt him, Jacob. They're going to physically hurt him. We are so scared. This was the life or death situation. Not cancer, not an accident. Just another one of Leo's catastrophic financial failures. And then came the moment I knew was coming from the second I read the email. My father looked me straight in the eye, his face a mask of desperation. You have to sell the house, son, he said. It's the only way. The equity you have in it, it would be enough to cover the debt. You have to do this. You have to save your brother's life. I just stared at them. After 5 years of absolute silence, 5 years where they didn't know if I was alive or dead, their grand reunion plan was to demand I liquidate my single greatest asset to bail out my brother's latest disaster. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it was almost impressive. No, I said. The word fell into the silence of the diner booth like a stone. What? My mother whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. No, I repeated louder this time. I looked directly at Leo. You dug this hole. You can figure out how to get out of it. Get a job. Get 3 jobs. Declare bankruptcy. That's what normal people do. My house is not a solution to your problems. I threw $20 on the table to cover their coffee. I'm done. I walked out, and this time there was no sadness. There was only a cold, hard anger. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. They started the very next day. A phone call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a rambling, tearful plea. Then another from my father, this one angry and demanding. I blocked their numbers, so they escalated. A week later, on a Sunday afternoon, a car pulled up in front of my house. It was them. They just sat there, parked across the street, for hours, staring. It was creepy, unsettling. A clear message: we know where you live. When that didn't work, they got bolder. One evening, I was on a work call when someone started pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw my father's enraged face. He was screaming my name, his fists hammering against the wood. "Jacob, I know you're in there. Open this door, you coward. You're letting your brother die." I called the non-emergency police line. By the time the patrol car arrived, they were gone. But they had left a note taped to my door, scrawled in my mother's handwriting. "Family is everything. You will regret this." The harassment bled into my professional life. My colleague, David Miller, stopped by my desk one morning, a smug look on his face. David and I were the top contenders for an upcoming promotion to a team lead position, and he was not above playing dirty. "Hey Jacob," he said, loud enough for everyone in the cubicle farm to hear. "Got a weird call for you. Some guy named Leo? Sounded pretty desperate. Said it was a family emergency. Something about you owing him." He raised an eyebrow, enjoying my discomfort. They had found my work number. The final straw was the call from my uncle. Uncle Gene was my dad's younger brother. He'd always been the cool uncle, the one who seemed to understand me more than my parents did. When he called, I made the mistake of answering, thinking he might be a voice of reason. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "I heard about the situation. It's a real mess." Understatement of the year, Uncle Gene. I sighed, relieved to be talking to someone sane. "Listen, I know your parents and Leo are handling this all wrong," he continued. "They're panicking. But Jacob, this is serious. These guys Leo got mixed up with. They're not kidding around. Your brother's in real danger. So he should go to the police," I said. "He can't. It would only make it worse," Gene insisted. "Look, I know it's a lot to ask, but your dad's right. The house is the only way out. Between you and me, I know it's not fair, but family has to come first. I even invested a little bit in Leo's venture myself to help him out, so I've got some skin in the game too. I just want this to be over for everyone's sake." And there it was. That one sentence. I even invested a little bit myself. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a concerned uncle calling. This was a creditor. One of the people Leo owed money to. He wasn't trying to save Leo. He was trying to save his own investment. He was using our family connection to pressure me, just like the rest of them. The sense of betrayal was suffocating. He wasn't a safe harbor. He was just another shark in the water. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with rage. My home, my job, my last remaining family connection. They were poisoning everything. My sanctuary had become a siege. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. My father's furious face was burned into the back of my eyelids. My uncle's manipulative words echoed in my ears. They had turned my home, my fortress of solitude, into the front line of their war. It no longer felt safe. Felt like a trap. Around 3 a.m., I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Couldn't live like this. I couldn't work with them harassing my colleagues. I couldn't relax in my own living room, wondering if they were parked across the street. They had left me with no choice. I couldn't make them stop, but I could make myself disappear. I picked up my phone and called Anya. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but immediately alert when she heard mine. "Jake? What's wrong?" My voice was tight, strained. "They won't stop," I said, and I told her everything that had happened since the diner. The stalking, the pounding on my door, the call to my office, and finally the call from Uncle Gene. I could hear her sit up in bed. "He's one of the creditors? Oh Jake, that's awful. I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore, Anya," I said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I can't live here. They've ruined it for me." "So what are we going to do?" she asked. The we was immediate, unquestioning. It was the solid ground beneath my feet. An idea, radical and terrifying, had been forming in the back of my mind. I took a deep breath. I'm going to sell the house. Okay, she said, calm and steady. And then what? And then, I'm moving, I said, the plan solidifying as I spoke it aloud. I'm going to find a job in Austin, or work remotely, or I don't know, figure something out. But I'm coming there. To be with you. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a terrifying second, I thought I'd gone too far. But then she said, good, it's about time. My spare bedroom is getting lonely. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. This wasn't an act of defeat. It was an escape. It was a strategic retreat to a better life. I have to do it fast, I said, my mind already racing. And I have to do it quietly. They can't know. If they find out the house is for sale, they'll do something to sabotage it. I just know it. So, a private sale, she said, already in problem-solving mode. No for sale sign on the lawn. You'll need a good realtor you can trust. The next morning, I made the call. I found a top-rated agent in the area and explained the situation. I was brutally honest. I need to sell this house as fast as possible, with maximum discretion. I'm willing to list it below market value to attract a quick, no-fuss cash buyer. My only conditions are that there are no public listings and no sign on my lawn. This has to stay completely under the radar. The agent, a woman named Carol, was intrigued but professional. It's unusual, she said, but not impossible. I think I might have a few clients who would be interested in an off-market deal like this. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of sadness and exhilaration. I was letting go of the home I had worked so hard for, the physical symbol of my independence. But I was also cutting the last rope they could use to pull me back into their chaos. Let them pound on the door. Let them scream in the street. Soon enough, it wouldn't be my door anymore. Carol, the realtor, was as good as her word. Within a week, she had a potential buyer. Her name is Eleanor Gable, Carol explained over the phone. She's a recent widow looking to downsize. She wants a quiet neighborhood, and she's a cash buyer, which means we can close in less than 30 days. She loves the photos. We arranged a single, private showing. I met Mrs. Gable at the house. She was a kind-faced woman in her late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes. She walked through the rooms, her hand trailing lightly over the walls I had so carefully painted. She admired the garden I had cultivated. It has a good feeling, this house, she said softly. It feels like someone was very happy here. Her words were a punch to the gut. I told her, the words catching in my throat. She made an offer that afternoon, 5% below my already reduced asking price. I accepted without hesitation. The money was secondary. Freedom was the prize. The next step was telling my boss, Mr. Henderson. I dreaded the conversation. I was up for a major promotion, and I was about to walk in and tell him I was quitting and moving halfway across the country. I walked into his office and closed the door. Sir, I started. I need to put in my 2 weeks' notice. For personal reasons, I have to relocate to Austin. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He didn't look surprised. He looked thoughtful. Miller, he said, your timing is either terrible or perfect. How would you feel about heading up our new satellite office? I stared at him, dumbfounded. Sir, we've been planning an expansion for 6 months, he explained. Austin is our first target. We need a team lead to build the new division from the ground up. The job was going to be posted next month. It comes with a significant salary bump and a relocation package. I was going to offer it to you anyway, assuming you beat out Miller. It's yours if you want it. I walked out of his office in a daze. It was happening. Not just an escape, but a leap forward. A new city, a new job, a new life with the woman I loved. It felt like the universe was finally giving me a reward for a choice I should have made years ago. The closing on the house happened in 21 days. It was all done electronically. A quiet, anticlimactic end to a major chapter of my life. I packed my belongings into a moving truck over a single weekend. As I did a final walkthrough, I made a calculated decision. I left a few old, worthless things in the garage. A broken lawnmower, some empty paint cans, a stack of old magazines. From the outside, it would look like the garage was still in use. It would look like I still lived there. It was a small, deceptive detail, but my gut told me it might be important. I handed the keys to Carol, got in my packed car, and drove away from Willow Creek Drive for the last time. I didn't look back. For 2 weeks, I lived in a state of blissful limbo. I was staying in Anya's spare room, surrounded by boxes, but it felt more like home than my house had in months. We spent our evenings looking at apartments, planning our future. I blocked my parents' new numbers as soon as they tried to contact me from them. I blocked Uncle Gene. I blocked every possible avenue they had to reach me. I erected a digital wall around my new life. The silence I knew would be driving them insane. To them, my silence wasn't a boundary. It was a challenge. It was defiance. It was me, the ungrateful son, ignoring their righteous desperation. Later, I would piece together what happened during those 2 weeks from my friend Mark, who still had loose connections to some of my distant relatives. He told me the pressure on my parents was mounting. The people Leo owed money to were done with warnings. Payment was due, and Leo didn't have a cent. My family's panic turned into a foul, festering rage, and it was all directed at me. I was the one with the house. I was the one with the stable job and the high salary. I was the one hoarding the key to their salvation. According to Mark's cousin, there was a huge, screaming fight at my parents' house. Leo was in a full-blown meltdown, convinced his life was over. My father was pacing like a caged animal. It was Qley, my quiet, manipulative sister-in-law, who planted the final poisonous seed. Mark said his cousin overheard her talking to my mother on the phone. Her voice a syrupy blend of fake sympathy and cunning. "I'm just so worried, Eleanor," Qley had said. "What if he just sells the house and runs off with the money? I mean, if we can't have it to save Leo, he shouldn't be able to have it either. It wouldn't be fair. Someone could get angry enough to do something drastic. Make sure the house isn't sellable at all. You know?" She didn't have to say it outright. The implication was clear, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. If they couldn't get the money from the house, they would make damn sure I couldn't either. They would destroy it. It was a strategy of pure, spiteful self-destruction. The final, desperate act of a family that had forgotten how to build anything and only knew how to break things. And in their blind rage, they had no idea I had already handed the keys to someone else. They were loading their weapons for a battle that was already over, marching toward a field where the only person they could possibly wound was themselves. The night they chose was a moonless one. A thick blanket of clouds covered the sky, swallowing the light from the street lamps. It was the perfect stage for what they were about to do. They parked their car a block away and walked to 114 Willow Creek Drive, their shapes swallowed by the darkness. They were a terrifying trio. My father, Richard, his face set in a grim mask of righteous fury, carried a heavy crowbar. My mother, Eleanor, her fear curdled into a hard, bitter resolve, clutched a tire iron. And my brother, Leo, the golden child for whom all of this was being done, trailed behind them, armed with a baseball bat, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. They crept around to the back of the house, to the sliding glass door of the living room. They assumed I was gone, either at work or out of town. It never occurred to them that someone else might be inside. My father took the crowbar and, with a grunt of exertion, jammed it between the door and the frame. The lock buckled with a sickening crack of splintering wood. The door slid open. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing heavily in the sudden, profound silence of the house. And then they went to work. It wasn't a robbery. It was a violation, an act of pure, undiluted rage. My father swung the crowbar like a medieval weapon, shattering the large flat-screen television that sat on the mantel. Sparks flew, and the screen imploded with a hollow boom. That television didn't belong to me. It belonged to Mrs. Gable's late husband, one of the few things she had brought with her from their old family home. My mother, A woman who used to arrange flowers and bake cookies took the tire iron to the glass coffee table, reducing it to a glittering pile of shards. She ripped family photos off the walls, photos of Mrs. Gable's children and grandchildren, and threw them to the floor, stomping on the frames with a fury I couldn't have imagined she possessed. Leo, my pathetic, cowardly brother, swung his bat at the lamps, the vases, anything that would break. Each crash, each shatter, was a release of his own self-loathing, redirected at the inanimate objects he believed were mine. He was destroying the symbols of a life I had built without him, a life he envied and resented in equal measure. They tore down curtains. They overturned bookshelves, sending hundreds of books spilling onto the floor. They slashed the cushions of the sofa. In less than 10 minutes, they reduced a stranger's warm, peaceful living room to a war zone. The total cost of the damage, the police would later estimate, was close to $40,000. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. Mrs. Gable was a light sleeper. Her husband had been ill for years, and she had grown accustomed to waking at the slightest sound. She had been in her upstairs bedroom, reading a book, when she heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass from downstairs. Her first thought was that the wind had knocked something over. Then she heard the first heavy, rhythmic crash. Her heart leaped into her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't make a sound. Years of caring for a sick husband had taught her to remain calm in a crisis. She crept out of her bed, grabbed her cell phone from the nightstand, and locked herself in the master bathroom. Her fingers, trembling only slightly, dialed 911. "There's someone in my house," she whispered to the dispatcher, her voice steady despite the terror she must have felt. "I'm at 114 Willow Creek Drive. They're downstairs. They're destroying everything." As my family continued their rampage, fueled by a rage they thought was righteous, 2 police cruisers were already speeding silently through the darkened streets, their lights off, converging on the quiet suburban house that had suddenly become a crime scene. I arrived at the Lakewood police station just as the sun was beginning to stain the eastern sky a pale, sickly gray. I hadn't slept. The 4-hour drive had been a blur of highway lights and bad coffee, my mind replaying Officer Ramirez's words over and over. He met me at the entrance. "Mr. Miller, thanks for coming in so quickly." "Where are they?" I asked, my voice raw. "In an interview room. They're not being very cooperative," he said with professional understatement. "They keep demanding to see you. They think you're going to fix this." He led me down a sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway to a room with a large one-way mirror. I looked through, and there they were, my family. They were sitting around a metal table, looking small and pathetic under the harsh lights. My father's knuckles were scraped and bloody. My mother's hair was a mess, and tear tracks stained her face. Leo was rocking back and forth in his chair, chewing on his thumbnail like a scared little boy. "The homeowner, Mrs. Gable, is pressing full charges," Ramirez said quietly beside me. "Felony breaking and entering, felony vandalism. Given the value of the damage, they're facing serious jail time. Not to mention the civil suit she'll file. They'll need a very good lawyer." A lawyer. The word hung in the air. The kind of expensive problem I used to be expected to solve. "They want to talk to you," Ramirez said. "Do you want to talk to them?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I do." They led me into the room. The moment they saw me, a wave of relief washed over their faces, quickly followed by their usual wave of blame. "Jacob, thank God!" my mother cried, rushing towards me. An officer gently but firmly guided her back to her chair. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Mom," I said. My voice as cold and hard as the concrete floor. My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is your fault," he roared, his face contorted with rage. "All of this, if you had just been a good son and helped your brother, none of this would have happened. We were trying to teach you a lesson." "A lesson," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "A lesson in what?" "How to destroy property. How to terrorize an elderly woman. She wasn't supposed to be there." Leo whimpered from his corner. We thought the house was empty. You thought my house was empty, I corrected him. I let the silence stretch out, watching their confused faces. I had waited 5 years for this moment. 5 years of being the villain in their story. Now it was my turn to write the ending. My father puffed out his chest, trying to regain some semblance of authority. I have every right to be in my own son's house if I want to. I paid for half the damn furniture in that living room. He was lying, of course. He hadn't given me a dime. I looked him dead in the eye. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. And then, I delivered the final, devastating blow. That's the thing, Dad, I said, my voice clear and steady, each word a perfectly aimed stone. That isn't my house. He blinked. What are you talking about? It's not my house, I repeated slowly, savoring the moment. I sold it 3 weeks ago to Mrs. Gable, the woman you just terrorized in her own home. You didn't break into my house. You broke into the house of a complete and total stranger. The color drained from their faces. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Leo just stared at me, his eyes wide with dawning, uncomprehending horror. The entire foundation of their righteous anger, the entire justification for their criminal act, crumbled into dust in an instant. They hadn't been punishing me. They had been committing a random, senseless crime against an innocent woman. And I wasn't there to save them. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far, you're amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 below, it lets me know you've been with me on this journey. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My family's delusion that I would somehow make this all go away evaporated in the harsh reality of the legal system. They weren't dealing with their disappointing son anymore. They were dealing with the state of Lakewood. Mrs. Gable, though shaken, was resolute. She was not a vengeful woman, but she was a firm one. Her late husband had been a stickler for rules and consequences, and she was determined to see this through. She hired a lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense man who immediately filed a civil suit against my parents and brother for the full cost of the damages, plus emotional distress. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, their fingerprints all over the scene, Mrs. Gable's terrified 911 call, and their own idiotic confessions about trying to teach their son a lesson. Their court-appointed defender advised them to take whatever plea deal they could get. They were facing years in prison. The prosecutor, seeing their age and lack of prior offenses, offered a deal. Plead guilty to felony vandalism and criminal trespass, and they would get 5 years of probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and full upfront restitution to the victim. The breaking and entering charge would be dropped. Full upfront restitution. $40,000. They didn't have it. Their savings had been bled dry by Leo years ago. They had only one asset left. Their own house, the one I had grown up in. There was no other choice. They had to sell it. The process was a humiliating, frantic fire sale. They took the first lowball offer they got, desperate for the cash. After paying the real estate commission, the legal fees, and the $40,000 to Mrs. Gable's lawyer, they were left with just over $100,000. And then came the final, bitter irony. In the midst of the legal chaos, Leo finally confessed the truth about his debt. The dangerous people who were going to physically hurt him didn't exist. It was a lie. The debt was owed to a legitimate, albeit aggressive, investment firm and a few family members, including my Uncle Gene. The firm was threatening a lawsuit, which would ruin his credit and force him into bankruptcy, but no one was going to break his legs. He had manufactured the life-or-death scenario to manipulate our parents' emotions, to force their hand against me. When my father heard this, something in him finally broke. The blind devotion he'd always had for his golden child shattered. I wasn't there to see it, but Mark told me the fight was legendary. All the years of my father enabling Leo's failures culminated in one explosive confrontation. But it was too late. The damage was done. They took what little money was left from the sale of their home and gave it to Leo to pay off the most pressing of his debts. It wasn't enough to clear his name, but it was enough to keep him out of court for the time being. And just like that, they were homeless, broke, and irrevocably broken. The house they had destroyed in a bid to force me to sell mine had cost them their own. It was a perfect, terrible symmetry. A week before I was scheduled to move into my new apartment in Austin, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I answered. Jacob. It was my mother's voice, but it was a voice I had never heard before. It was stripped of all its anger, all its entitlement. It was just empty. Hi, Mom, I said, my tone neutral. We lost the house, she said, her voice flat. The sale closed today. We have to be out by the end of the month. I heard, I said. There was a long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath. Your father, he's not well, Jacob. He hasn't been the same since all of this. He barely speaks. He just sits in his chair and stares at the wall. He looks like an old man. I didn't say anything. I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his face, contorted with rage, as he hammered on my door. Leo and Qley are letting us stay with them for a while, she continued, the humiliation dripping from every word. In their one-bedroom apartment. Richard and I will be on a pull-out sofa in the living room. The image was so bleak, so pathetic, that I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. We made a mistake, Jacob, she whispered, and now the tears were coming. A terrible, terrible mistake. I see that now. We were so scared for Leo we weren't thinking straight. I'm sorry. The apology I had longed to hear for most of my life. And now that it was here, it meant nothing. It wasn't born of remorse. It was born of desperation. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry for how it had turned out for them. I have to go, Mom, I said. Wait, she cried, her voice rising in panic. Please, Jacob, don't hang up. We have nothing. Your father can't work anymore. Can you help us? Just a little bit to get a small apartment of our own? Please, we're your family. There it was. The real reason for the call. Our relationship ended 5 years ago, Mom, I said, my voice gentle but absolutely final. The night you and Dad told me to give Leo my life savings or I was no longer your son. I accepted those terms. Everything that's happening now. This is just the paperwork being finalized. I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. A desperate, hopeless sound. I wish you the best, I said, and I meant it in a detached sort of way. I didn't wish them ill. I just didn't wish them anything at all. They were no longer a part of my equation. Goodbye, Mom. I ended the call and blocked the number. And I felt nothing, just quiet. The war was finally over. 1 year can change everything. I was sitting in my office. My actual office with a door and a window overlooking the hills of Austin. The plaque on the door read Jacob Miller, Head of Engineering. Mr. Henderson had been true to his word. The promotion was real, the relocation package was generous, and the work was the most challenging and rewarding of my career. I had built a team from scratch, a group of brilliant, motivated engineers who respected me not because of my title, but because of the work we did together. David Miller, my old workplace rival, had ended up being passed over for the promotion I would have vacated. Sometimes things just work out. My life with Anya was better than I could have imagined. We had moved out of her place and into a beautiful apartment downtown. Our life was filled with laughter, with weekend trips to the hill country, with quiet nights spent cooking together. She was my partner in every sense of the word. She celebrated my victories, supported me through my stresses, and never once made me feel like I owed her anything but my love and respect. We were happy. It was a simple, profound happiness that felt solid and real, built on a foundation of trust, not obligation. One Saturday, we decided to do something we'd been talking about for months. Go look at open houses. Not because we needed to move, but because we wanted to dream together. We drove to a neighborhood with large oak trees and charming houses, each with its own unique character. We walked into a beautiful two-story home with a wide front porch and a big backyard. As Anya explored the kitchen, I walked into the living room. It was empty, the floors bare, but a large window let in the warm afternoon light. I thought back to my old house on Willow Creek Drive, to the living room I had so carefully put together, and the living room my family had so violently torn apart. For so long, a house had meant security to me. It meant a wall to keep the world out, a place to hide from the chaos of my family. But standing there, in that empty room, with the sound of Anya's happy voice drifting in from the other room, I realized my definition had changed. Anya came and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how much my life has changed," I said. "A year ago, I was selling my house to escape my family. Now, I'm thinking about buying one to build a family." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "I like the sound of that," she said. I looked at her, at this incredible woman who had stood by me, who had been my anchor in the storm. The idea of a future, of a marriage, of children, it wasn't scary. With her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I knew in that moment what my next step was. I just needed the perfect time to ask. The feeling of peace was so complete, it was almost overwhelming. The ghosts of the past were finally silent. A few weeks later, I got a call from my old friend, Mark. We tried to catch up every couple of months, and he was my only remaining link to the gossip mill of my old hometown. "You are not going to believe the latest drama from the Miller train wreck," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "I'm almost afraid to ask." I laughed. "So, get this," he said. "Leo and Qley finally split up. Apparently, living in a cramped apartment with his broke, miserable parents wasn't the glamorous life she signed up for. There's going to be a divorce." "Wow," I said, genuinely surprised. "I thought they were a team." "Oh, they were," Mark said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "A team of grifters. And this is the best part. My cousin is friends with Qley's sister. And apparently, Qley has been telling her sister the real story of what happened with that loan." I sat down. "The real story?" "Yep," Mark said. "It turns out Leo was hesitant to borrow from Uncle Gene. He knew Gene would go straight to your dad if things went south. It was Qley who pushed him. She was the one who found out Gene had some money to invest. She was the one who convinced Leo it was a good idea. Her logic was that if they borrowed from family, and the business failed, the family, meaning you, would have no choice but to bail them out. It was a setup from the very beginning. She was counting on you caving." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Qley, the quiet, supportive wife, always in the background. She hadn't been a follower. She'd been the architect of the entire disaster. She had intentionally used our family's twisted dynamics against us, creating a situation where my back was against the wall. The betrayal was so much deeper and more calculated than I had ever imagined. "Unbelievable," I breathed. "She played you all," Mark said. "But look, the reason I'm telling you this is so you know, once and for all, that you made the right call. You didn't just escape a sinking ship. You escaped a crew of pirates who were actively trying to sink it. You're free, man." After I hung up, I wasn't angry. I was just calm. He was right. I was free. The last lingering thread of what if had been snipped. That evening, I took Anya to Town Lake for a walk. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. We stopped on the pedestrian bridge, looking out over the water as the kayakers paddled by below. I turned to her. My heart was beating fast, but not with anxiety. It was beating with a certainty I had never felt before in my life. "Anya," I started, my voice a little shaky. "A year ago, my life was a mess. I was running away from a past that I thought would always define me. And then I came here to you. You didn't try to fix me. You just saw me. You believed in me. You are my home. Not a place, not a building, but you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small box I'd been carrying for a week. I got down on one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and sparkling with tears. "Anya Sharma," I said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. I don't want to spend another day of my life without you. Will you marry me? She was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, she whispered, then shouted it for the whole world to hear. Yes, of course, yes. I slipped the ring onto her finger, and as I stood up and pulled her into my arms, I knew that this was it. This was the beginning. Not an escape, but a destination. 6 months later, Anya and I stood on the wide front porch of the 2-story house with the big backyard. Our house. The sale had been smooth, a joyous, shared experience that was the polar opposite of my last real estate transaction. We hadn't needed my old house money for the down payment. Our combined salaries and my promotion package had more than covered it. The money from the Willow Creek sale was now invested, quietly growing. A nest egg for a future that was no longer a solo flight but a shared journey. The moving truck had just left, and the house was filled with our boxes. A chaotic but happy jumble of our 2 lives merging into one. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Anya leaned her head on my shoulder, looking out at the yard where we would one day watch our children play. It's perfect, she sighed contentedly. It is, I agreed. I thought about the word family. For most of my life, it had been a word associated with obligation, with guilt, with a heavy, crushing weight. It meant sacrificing my needs for their wants. It meant my success was not my own, but a resource to be tapped for my brother's failures. My parents, in their twisted way, probably thought they loved me. But their love was conditional. It was transactional. It had a price tag, and that price was my own happiness. Walking away from them was the hardest and best decision I ever made. It taught me that sometimes the family you choose, the friends who stand by you, the partner who builds you up, is more real and more vital than the family you were born into. My family now was Anya. It was Mark, who was flying in next week to be the best man at our wedding. It was the family we were going to create right here in this house. I looked down at Anya, her face full of hope and love, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been brutal. The scars were real, but they had led me here. They had led me to her. Home, I said aloud. We're home. She looked up at me and smiled, and in her eyes, I saw our entire future. It was a future free from manipulation and guilt. It was a future built not on obligation, but on a foundation of pure, unconditional love. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a reminder that it's okay to choose your own peace, even if it's a difficult path. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own happiness? I'd be honored to hear about your experience in the comments below. Please share your story, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.